Most guitarists approach their pedal board with a massive, fundamental misunderstanding. They treat their reverb pedal or their amp spring tank like it's just another simple coloring tool. Well, we're going to abandon that approach right here, entirely. Reverb is not just some mere seasoning you sprinkle on to fill the void of a dry signal. It is the original studio effect. It predates EQ, it predates compression, and it requires a rigorous, mathematical approach to actually configure correctly.
You see the distinction instantly in any high-level production environment. While the amateur is busy rotating the intensity knob looking for some generic vibe, the professional is executing a rigorous diagnosis. We use reverb strictly as an acoustic space simulation, adjusting physical variables to calculate the precise depth, width, and cohesion of a virtual environment. We're defining the exact architecture where each instrument actually lives, all while preserving the frequency spectrum.
Now, to build this virtual architecture, we've got to start with foundational acoustics. We have to completely discard abstract terms and rely on exact technical parameters. And the foundational metric of this acoustic pressure decay is a measurement of how long it takes for a sound to drop by exactly 60 decibels after the sound source ceases. In acoustics, we universally know this as the RT60 measurement.
This metric gives us our absolute most critical control variable, because decay time is the exact duration it takes for the acoustic pressure of a signal to drop by 60 decibels, defining the physical dimensions of your simulated room. Adjusting this parameter means you aren't just twisting a knob, you are literally calculating and constructing the physical volume and the reflective boundaries of the space around your guitar.
Professionals select this decay time based on very strict diagnostic goals. Say we're simulating the tight, controlled environment of a recording studio or a technical control room, our target RT60 is extremely short, ranging from 0.2 to 0.4 seconds. That specific numerical parameter ensures the absolute utmost mix accuracy, allowing transient detail to translate perfectly without any unwanted coloration from the room itself.
Contrast that highly controlled environment with the sheer acoustic demands of a symphonic concert hall. Here, the professional targets a decay time right between 1.8 and 2.2 seconds, which provides the musical flourishing necessary for large ensembles to breathe. Massive spaces like cathedrals, well, they can easily exceed 3.5 seconds, but you're sacrificing absolute intelligibility there for a massive cloud that just completely envelops the notes.
And this right here exposes a fundamental psychoacoustic dissonance that constantly plagues amateur mixes. A player will often set a decay time that completely contradicts the visualized space of the recording. Look, if you're aiming for the tight cohesion of a small room setup, your decay time requires values strictly below 0.5 seconds. Ignoring this physical metric results in a completely disconnected, honestly jarring acoustic reality.
Let's look at what's actually happening in the physical space. These structural sound pressure decay curves reveal it perfectly. The persistence of sound involves multiple, highly complex reflections bouncing off the surfaces that make up a diffuse sound field. Understanding exactly how these modes of vibration decay over time, well, that's how we begin to separate the distinct stages of reverberation, diagnosing how they're going to interact with your instrument's tone.
We divide this complex decay into two distinct stages, where early reflections are the deterministic sound waves occurring in the first 80 milliseconds that give body and presence, signaling room size to the human ear. These initial echoes, they don't sound like distinct, separate repetitions. Instead, they merge directly with your original guitar signal to provide clarity and firmly establish physical location.
That boundary of 80 milliseconds, that acts as a totally critical threshold. Once we cross this point, those deterministic reflections break down, turning into stochastic, Gaussian noise. We identify this chaotic, diffuse energy as the late reverberant tail. By treating your early reflections and that late tail completely independently, we can preserve the initial attack's clarity while intentionally sculpting the late tail for pure dimension.
But when you ignore these boundaries and mismanage your decay time, you absolutely destroy your tone. Amplitude fluctuations and phase differences are the direct, unavoidable result of correlated reflections. When your virtual space is improperly configured, these reflections create severe comb filtering. They literally collide and cause destructive phase masking, actively canceling out the fundamental frequencies of your guitar and completely, destructively altering its timbre.
Tell me in the comments, have you noticed your reverb settings change the tone completely when you adjust decay time? To protect that tone and prevent those destructive collisions, we rely heavily on a critical parameter. Pre-delay is the exact time interval between the dry transient attack and the onset of the reverberation cloud. Think about the physical world. It actually takes time for sound to leave your amplifier, travel to the nearest wall, and reflect back to you.
Pre-delay replicates this physical delay, ensuring your fundamental attack punches right through before the acoustic simulation even begins.
Setting this parameter correctly is precisely what keeps your guitar present and aggressive, even within a very dense mix. We typically utilize a precise pre-delay range of 10 to 80 milliseconds. This specific window prevents the reverb from acting immediately and binding itself right to the dry sound. Without this vital acoustic separation, the reverb completely obscures the articulation and the definition of your actual performance.
Take a look at this simulation of a short 150 millisecond note burst. A proper pre-delay ensures that articulated guitar transients maintain all their joint and punch. By intentionally delaying the onset of that diffuse field, your initial attack remains completely intact. This is what ensures your playing actually cuts through the environment, maintaining clarity rather than sounding like it just fell down a well and became this washed-out, muddy blur.
Now, even with perfect decay and perfect pre-delay, the raw reverb return still carries excessive energy in frequencies that only generate disorder in a mix. This is why equalizing the reverb signal is an absolutely non-negotiable step. We apply the classic Abbey Road equalization technique. It's a rigorous standard used in professional production since the 1960s, treating the simulated room to ensure it fits perfectly around the instrument, rather than fighting it.
The first stage of this treatment is applying a high-pass filter strictly at 600 Hz on the reverb return itself. Look, reverberation heavily accumulates low-frequency energy. If you leave it untreated, this low-end buildup completely masks the bass drum. It clashes heavily with the bass guitar, and it generates a dense mud in the lower frequencies of the entire mix. Cutting everything below 600 Hz instantly cleans the floor of your acoustic space.
The second stage addresses the top end. We apply a low-pass filter starting right between 6,000 and 10,000 Hz. Real acoustic spaces naturally absorb high frequencies very quickly. By aggressively rolling off these highs in the reverb, we remove the piercing, metallic brightness and that artificial wheezing from the reverb tail. This crucial step keeps the space sounding natural, allowing the true air and brightness of your actual dry signal to cut through unhindered.
We also must dictate the internal texture of this environment, which is where diffusion determines the density of reflections over time, turning spaced echoes into a thick, uniform tail. Lower diffusion leaves those reflections audibly spaced apart, often sounding thin or sort of metallic. Higher diffusion, on the other hand, creates a dense, uniform wash. This high density is exactly how we cut through heavily distorted rhythm guitars without introducing any spatial confusion.
Finally, the professional adapts these acoustic rules strictly based on a deployment environment. In a live venue, the physical room already provides natural reverberation. It's much like singing in a tiled shower. Adding a long, dense hall reverb to that environment just turns the mix into a totally unintelligible blur. So live, we deploy very short spring tanks or plates. In the studio, however, we have the acoustic isolation required to layer automated, highly calculated long halls.
We have clearly established that this is not an effect to be thrown on indiscriminately. If every millisecond of altered decay and every hertz of equalization fundamentally reconstructs the virtual architecture of your music, why do we still accept treating reverb as a simple, generic effect rather than a rigorous acoustic science? Are we content to be passive users of predefined algorithms, or will we step up to be true architects of acoustic space?